So Nóra Blascsók is a Hungarian poet based in Manchester. Nóra used to live in Brighton, but she left a few months after I arrived. Her poems have appeared in anthologies and magazines, including Magma, The Rialto, Bath Mag, Butcher's Dog, Acumen, Finnish Creatures, Shearsman, and others. Her debut pamphlet, Body of Work, Body, was published by Broken Sleep Books in June 2022. And I think for the benefit of past, present, and future employers and employees, it should be noted that her poetry and any resemblance to organizations or people living or dead is purely coincidental. And moreover, purely down to her extremely impressive creativity and imagination, my lord. Nóra.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Simon, for having me. It's really great to be here for the launch of this wonderful book. Just to say, I promised I didn't leave Brighton because of you, Simon. I thought I'd start with some poems that were actually part of a pamphlet that Simon and Rowan and I put together that never made it out in the world. Simon's got such a wealth of work that when we suggested the topic, he immediately came out with about 20 poems that were relevant. So I'm always in awe of Simon, and to follow him as a reader is also going to be difficult, but I'm going to try my best. So the first poem I'm going to read was in the Rialto issue 99 in November, called, oh sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page, called Sunk Through. Sunk Through. Oh, everyone can hear me, right? Just show me a thumbs up. Yeah, cool. Before I read through the whole set. Sunk through. A robin trills, a cock crows in sync. I wish humans could talk like this. I despise musicals. To go from talk to song so suddenly, it's unnatural. I start to crow quietly, beak white and hygienic. Have you ever met a germaphobe? Bird digging in mud, not squeamish. A squeak as I sit by the window, watch the scrapyard move to its own rhythm. Shoveling car doors, a stack of cards. A blackbird on top calls out, and I respond in perfect pitch. Thank you. Can't see anyone because I'm looking at my document. I'm going to go on to my next poem, which is titled Liver Pate. Came out in Shearsman. I'm just giving credit not to show off, but to show that these magazines get the credit they deserve. Liver Pate. Innards wobble like that bit of liver grandmother served on a summer evening, spread on a slice with fat. I remember now, the liver wasn't wobbly, it was hard to spread. Chunks of it on my tongue, heavy like that animal, me not uneasy yet about eating that flesh. One day I'll be in the middle of the road, same turn every day driving, and the deer that appears from the trees is me 30 years ago. Wait, 40 years ago, wide-eyed, not expecting bad things. The worst that could happen is a paw tangled up in ivy, or I could be hit by a car. Guess that's something that can always happen. If you're 5 or a deer, you don't expect your life could end any moment. Bam! And I will be remembered by fellow deer, or it will be my absence they notice, but carry on as if nothing happened. As I lie on the road, driver above scratching her head or throwing up, depending on degree of discomfort around fresh blood or innards, not knowing what to do. First clean up, dial some helpline, need to get the order right. Open the glove box, let the serrated edge do the work, move it back and forward. Thank you. Next poem. I wrote this poem when I don't like to give background, but just a little background. I wrote this poem when I had COVID last year. That might come through anyway, but it just came out in Magma's food issue. Work with invisible walls. Watch a snail trailing goo across the hardwood floor. Ask myself why I need such a large fridge. The hum is constant. The radiator cracks its joints out of sink. Tomato sauce dries on sharp tin. Tongue picturing blood post-lick. Sinkhole gravity. One single bean wedged in. By the power vested in me, I pronounce it so draining. The snail considers a loft extension, needs planning permission. How about investing in insulation? My fingers spider around the pen, an oven tray contracts, expands. That hum. Outside, it's overcast, inside it's eggs, sunny burnt toast. Pull out crumb shelf, invite ants for a picnic at the border between hob and worktop. One by one, they carry crumbs, a diplomatic success. Ants from next door and ants from below sign a treaty. Declare my kitchen neutral territory. I reach for the last toast, a giant shadow. Tray scurries under forearm. Thank you. And the next poem is I'm going to read 3 more poems, and they're all, no, 4 if I got time. I might just read 3. That are in my pamphlet that Simon mentioned, called Body of Work, Body, published by Broken Sleep Books. This one is was inspired by a quote by former UK Health Secretary and commercial landlord Jeremy Hunt. There's only so long you can carry on working completely remotely, or you start losing the fizz and excitement that you get in a really good workplace. Fizz and excitement. Recall that feeling of entering. Honey, I'm home. Remember stepping over threshold, now hardening. Outside, a foreign entity. Remember standing by the water. Cooler office plant says good morning. 9 a.m. meeting, 10 a.m. meeting, 11 a.m. pop out for a packet of cheese and dread. Walk home in anticipation. Downhill ride. Hair flying. Do you need anything from the shops? A crunchy. Commute to couch. Shut eyes. Picture yoga, shavasana, breathe, hug yourself tight, straitjacket style, sleep. Recall that feeling. And I'm going to read next another poem from the pamphlet. How am I doing for time, Simon?
I didn't time you. Carry on. Just do the poems you had planned. It's fine.
Okay. Next one is called Wallowing is a Sign of Well-Being in Swine. Roll around like pigs in this language. Parasite. Scratch until I bleed acronyms. Pleasantries roll off my tongue. Blubber side to side. Spit them out like corsadil. This vocabulary corrodes my palate. Familiar flavors turn sour. Lap it up. Emerge for air, watch others give into it, trotters in the air, cooling, waiting for a belly rub. I'm going to skip the next poem and read the last poem, Sinking, which appeared in Butch's Dog and also in the pamphlet. It's actually my favorite poem in the pamphlet, so leaving it last. Sinking. Giving birth to mice is a bad omen. Pull them out by the tail like eggs in the movie Airplane. They keep coming. Last night, one ran across the room. I wanted to shed skin and replace it with glass. Encase myself in domestic. Double glazed follow slug trail down rabbit hole, spin around own axis. We're in the same cell. I-beams flashing in sync. There are 1,048,576 rows in a spreadsheet. That's it from me. Thank you so much for having me, Simon, and I hope everyone enjoys the upcoming poems.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nóra. We're now going to move on to Julie. Julie grew up in Leicestershire and is plotting a return after teaching English in West London. She veers between writing poetry and overdoing it by distance running, weight training and yoga. Her poetry has been published in 14 magazine and Long Poem magazine, among others. Julie has been on retreat in Crete, and rumor has it that she still has her ankles wrapped around her neck and will not be able to read live. Either that or she's got dicky Wi-Fi. So we're going to have hopefully a recording of her poems. So over to Julie. She is there waving, but
yeah, I'm hanging in here, right? Hoping it won't dump me out like it did a few minutes ago.
Sorry, I'd started you.
My first poem is a sonnet. Its original inspiration is Rembrandt painting, but it also draws on personal experience. And what doesn't really, but one of the things that makes me really enjoy writing sonnets is how compressed they are. I think of Edna St Vincent Millay starting a sonnet with "I've put chaos into 14 lines" and held him there. And I love that sense of a sonnet containing so much action and thinking, all sort of jostling and bursting to get out. Bursting to get out. I don't promise that in my poem, but it does help to explain how it manages to contain both Rembrandt and a brush I had with mortality a few years back. Being Bathsheba. Rembrandt's mistress is being Bathsheba, grave in contemplation, unsuspecting of espial, or how her nakedness shadows her mortality, foretold in a dimpling coloration of the left breast. The surgeon, patient, explains to me wide local excision of the right nipple areola. Neither kneading nor ultrasound can locate the dimensions of a carcinoma. I think of it as a Kalamata olive with an annulus of chalk, calcifications glinting on a screen, a language of flesh I don't recognise as mine, but is, however innocuous in its naming, potent, tight-budded, readying to bloom. I have 3 daughters who are now grown up, but when they were small and taking a family of 5 on holiday pretty much anywhere was very expensive. It was a huge gift to us to be able to pack everyone in the car where we lived in Chester and head south down the motorway to North Devon, where my in-laws had a small cottage which overlooked the Torridge estuary. This next poem remembers that cottage. 47 New Street, Appledore. Motorway weary, we'd fling open curtains shut on the estuary, take in house lights flickering the other side the water. The familiar battles with the heating, warm showers if we were lucky, the grateful flop into old pine beds. By morning he'd have been here, lugging his haul of wrasse and crabs, pollock and cod, from wrecks out by Lundy, loosing their sea-flesh stench up the narrow stairs, up inside the roof space. We wondered at him, so patient, lured ashore by lantern glow after weeks of blankness. How silent he moved in his Devonian strength, merman sloughing off the torrid silt, sea salt carapace dragged from night water. Nothing deterred him. We didn't try. His habits hung about a day or so, dispersed, it seemed, to the old familiar, family even. We got a man in for the broken roof tile, climbed inside the crawl space, chiselled gulshit inches thick, phosphates hardened, rinds of fish, feasts years gone. Our fisherman, he left no trace, no forwarding address. Outbound on MS Oldenburg. We don't expect him now. My last poem is about my father. He's now 94. He worked as an engineer, didn't retire until he was 74, and even now regrets retiring as he feels it so young. He's full of engineering stories, and my last poem is based on one of these stories about being inside an anechoic chamber, which, as I understand it, is a room in which all sound has been completely erased and closed off. Anechoic chamber. He didn't like it there, in among those negative decibels, listening only to his own heart, his stomach, his lungs. He became the sound inside. In the darkness, he needs to sit down, no cues to know himself by, plot his being here at all, his coordinates in space. He calls me from his chair, and I'm in the kitchen, as the kettle boils its familiar rumble. I can't hear his words, and he can't hear me say so. Like my mother-in-law, many years deaf, calling, "Are you there?" Like someone drowning, flailing for a mooring in the vast silences of the house. Slowly she reeled us in from the farthest rooms, back into her gravity. Irritable falconer, knowing soon we'd shear away like always. Today he speaks of the remarkable miniaturization of hearing aids, insists he can hear me, all but the odd word, and of how they're only receivers. My mind drifts into thinking if they were transmitters, magnifying his thoughts, transmitting them into my incomprehension, my dutiful, daughterly attention. I think I know what they'd transmit, a mute fear of that chamber, and its grim rehearsal of taking your place in element dispersal. Thanks so much. Good night.
We can't hear you, Simon.
You're on mute, Simon.
Sorry about that, everybody. Thank you so much, Julie, especially coming in from faraway Crete after such a lovely retreat I know you've been having. Now we've got our third crocodile reader. Rowan Lyster is a poet and physiotherapist in training from Herefordshire, when based in Bristol. Her poems have appeared in journals including Bath Mag, Magma, Poetry Wales, and the Rialto, as well as the Crocodile Collective. She's a member of the South Bank Centre New Poets Collective. Rowan's poem Crocodile was the inspiration for our collective, and after it had been published in, was it Ambit or Magma? One of the two.
The Rialto.
Oh, the Rialto. I knew it was one of the big ones. Yeah, it was just published when we set up the group, and I came up with the idea because I love the poem so much. There's a chance you might be reading it. But anyone who's seen Rowan's profile picture might be might assume that the naughtiest thing that she'd ever done is run through a farmer's field of wheat. Although I've been unreliably informed that this is not the case. Over to you, Rowan. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Simon. Yeah, I've done much worse things. Again, 3 hard acts to follow, but I'll do my best. And thanks so much for having me here tonight. I'm excited to read. Please, somebody shout in the chat if I'm inaudible. My voice is a bit quiet today. I'm going to start with the poem Simon mentioned, Crocodile. His teeth are only sharp because that's how they were made. You have to admit he's an ideal guest, helping to cook the Sunday roast. He peels a mean potato and replacing most of the crockery he breaks. He doesn't drink other people's milk or leave anything in the shower drain except a slight scent of rotting meat, which isn't his fault. He's never been caught in any of our rooms going through papers when he thought we were out. And he was so kind when the cat went missing, calling up and down the street all night. So why this shifting in your seat when the soft, cool scales of his belly brush your arm? How can I ask him to leave now? This next poem is about long COVID, which I do not recommend if you haven't tried it. It's called "It Can Help to Know That Others Are Experiencing Something Similar." I'm having a flare-up of brain fog. In the heat, the nurse said many patients report feeling a weighted blanket on their limbs. There is no timeline for recovery. Everything is always the hardest thing. I am having a bit of trouble with my breathing. A flare-up of weighted blankets and elephants standing on my head. The nurse said, sometimes your brain is cornflour mixed with water. It is important to live inside the fatigue diary. Actions causing fatigue, like completing a diary or self-blame, should be listed in the fatigue diary. The air is exhausted, a weighted blanket. Sometimes it is cornflour mixed with elephants. There is nothing new to offer here. The sofa and I resent each other. I have been referred to an app for patience and sucked all the sugar off the ibuprofen. These next couple of poems happen to have both been written in lockdown, although I wouldn't say they're about lockdown, but maybe some of it comes through them. The first one was published in Anthropocene. I think it's online somewhere. And the second one was published in Poetry Wales, and it isn't online anywhere. A bad summer. This year it has healed over, smooth and new, almost the same shape as before. And we will be fine if we don't think about all those fingers gone missing, surely due to emerge soon, blossoming like mushroom caps, the end of something bright against clay, or where the hedge gives way to sky abruptly among shattered hazel, a wrist. This one I think maybe is, the next one is a bit more lockdowny than that one actually, in the weird way that time has started moving since COVID began. I don't know if everybody else is experiencing that or if it's just me, but I feel like time has stopped being normal. Getting stuck in the rain, seeking shelter in the church porch. Give it 5 hours and the two of you are somehow newlyweds expecting your first, rebuilding this derelict cottage you found. The best way to learn to juggle is stand against a wall. That way you can't accidentally step back. Why not start with swords? You're looking radiant, your swollen body, your neat little hands grabbing at air. This next one I've chosen to read because although it's not really about an island, it was written on one, so I thought it might speak in some way to Simon's wonderful book. It's called Lichen Can Weather Anything But Change. My lungs are full of seabirds, relieved by taking shallow breaths. I meant to stay inside, but instead, this rock is no place for conversation. The water draws patterns across itself. My hands, a vessel to hold the wind steady. Grip, a distinctive dry crunching sound. Standing on a rock waiting for the water. Can nothing be done about the ripples? I threw a leaf in the current. It sank. Like blood, this feeling should stay inside. This place does not hold you the way it holds me. I've just got a couple more. The next one was actually prompted by a park near Canary Wharf. I don't know if anyone happens to have been there, but it's basically like a pretend park. There's some real trees and some real grass, and also some fake trees and some fake grass. And there's like piped bird song. And it's one of the most disconcerting places I've ever been. But at least, despite spending a less than restful half hour there, it sparked something. Try to focus on breathing. I suspect the trees aren't real. The grass creaks. I must sit here carefully to avoid being seen. The air is fraying. Backs of my knees itch. Though the leaves are convincing. Small warty bumps, insect holes. I am entirely still except a muscle below my left eye. The first time I saw my own blood, I did not believe it was part of myself, too bright. The ducks are pretending to be ducks. That one is available online, should you wish to find it. It's on Bath Mag. So I'll read one more and then leave you in the fantastic hands of Simon. This one is called Goat Extravaganza, £50 per person. And the title is drawn very directly from an Airbnb listing in the north of Scotland, somewhere around Speyside, for an Airbnb activity. What they could possibly be charging £50 a person for relating to goats, I could not hazard a guess, but it was real in August 2020. Goat Extravaganza, £50 per person. As you drive away, goats will be chewing your scarf, dry tongues of goats scratching your palm, rummaging under the seats for kibbles, their crafty goat eyes catching yours in the rearview mirror the whole way home, strutting up the garden path, sidelong pupils in the shower glass when you clean your teeth, the whiff of a goat as you fall asleep. You will wake to bleating. Dressed to the nines in your clothes, goats will be reading your post, raising their quite spectacular eyebrows, answering the door to your home, to a trench coat, checking in guests, selling them kibbles in small paper bags. Thank you, that's me done. I will hand over to the wonderful Simon to read his brilliant poems, and get your hands on a copy of this if you don't already have one. It's brilliant.
Thanks so much, Rowan. And I posted your Linktree your Linktree link in there. It's got links to a lot of your poems that are available online, hasn't it? So thank you very much again. I'm back. So that's 3 of the wonderful Crocodile Collective. So I'm going to do a further reading of my book, The Whole Island. Yeah, of course, it's just, yeah, you must have seen it online anyway, but which I am very, very proud of. So the final sentence of Enslain Elian was on the edge of extinction, on the edge of the whole island, the edge of our language hovers. And that really sort of inspired the further exploration of that, and inspired me to write this poem, actually. Our language drips. In the dark, I am afraid of meeting my emptiness, but I must return to the isle of my birth before I become my own extinction. Our native Igilg was nearly silenced from what only it can express. I nearly zipped my own lips in a black-bagged lack of understanding that it is language that restores our place, that speaks louder than any plinth, that, when it cries, deepens the sea. It is near impossible to describe the sun rising, but it is possible to feel the language of the sun setting on darkness. The term fodiac in Manx Gaelic means homesickness or nostalgia or longing, and those that know Welsh will be familiar with the word hiraeth. I've probably said it wrong, but hiraeth, which has the same meaning. And this poem's inspired by a Welsh person who asked me this question. Fodiac. He asks if I yearn for it, if I have a word for it, like hiraeth, how he feels when away from his other Celtic home, and I brush it off like a speck of fluff, as if it's obvious a queer would hate being kept in a beautifully busy cottage, tucked away in a private bay below Milner's tower. It's a folly to think I want to be where he is, to think I could add anything to this, like my pride in having scuba dived the world over in the marine biology station here at Port Erin. How it's now closed. Manannan Mac Lir is the Celtic son of the sea, and he's the son of the Irish god Lear. And legend has it that he is the Lord of Man, and even the creator of man. This is Manannan Mac Lir. Nothing has changed, mourning a ruined family, his lost humanity inflicting wounds on the other world. His tears, pearls that fled the sea, turn into that single mountain island where I was raised from my mother's womb, gasping for life in a tent for 7 days, 7 years, or 70 months. I now forget. When I cried, it was on the inside, growing a cardiac rock with lichen cracks and moss where I weep. For the next poem, it's probably worth mentioning to you that puffiness is actually the Manx shearwater, and that Ironfella and Rothan are both Manx dialect and Gaelic for the Ratus norvegicus. And some of you will probably know I can't say the other word, it's not allowed. Puffin mother, you abandoned the nest, left our sanctuary, pushed away by the Ironfella, also eating up puffiness, who only appears to be you. We perched plastic models to bring you back, better versions of ourselves, perfect in the way no offspring can be. We played sounds of domestic bliss, borrowed from a faraway colony. We lined up loudspeakers atop the cliffs like a picket fence, singing apple pie. Whether due to this highly fabricated world or Rothan's absence, you returned, not home exactly, because you were a different mother. But you came back just the same and are in fact still here. Even so long since you went away. Thanks to my wonderful sister, I am wearing my mother's pearls. If you'd said that to me 40 years ago, that I'd end up wearing my mum's pearls, I'd never have believed you, but here they are. The next poem, again, there's a lot of Manx Gaelic and Manx dialect in the whole island. This poem is called Cherished, which in Manx Gaelic means trust, hope, and confidence. A three-legged man was bored of the island and caught a ship through the universe, where he reached a dark puddle, standing on one leg, another lagging, shaking between fear and anticipation. The third leg stepped into the puddle. This leg, certain it wasn't a black hole. After all, there was no event horizon, meaning the puddle edges didn't glow. However, his mother popped up and said, only the boring get bored. So the man, with all those legs intact, came back to the island and visited all of the places he ever loved. On the edge of everywhere, there is always something new, and all the scenes we've played before never feel the same. Quite a few of the poems in this book are sort of based in the south of the island, which is where the Maddrells come from, and also around Port Erin, which is where my after we were thrown off our farm, or the farm, should I say, we moved to, the family moved for 1 year to Port St Mary, then to Port Erin. So it's a special place for me anyway. And this poem is actually shaped, it's a sort of an upside down concrete poem. If you see it in the book, it's like the reflection of a locksmith's tower in the sea. Our walk began in Bradder Glen. Dappled leaves patchwork my bare skin. Mulch tramples turn to a moorland trek. Little when little did I know that this imposing tower overlooking my idyllic bay was not a castle, but built to honour a locksmith's gifts. 4 kids chasing ahead, parents ambling along, when all of a sudden, in our desire to hide, I dive spread-eagled onto gorse, not thinking or assuming it was heather. I forget which. Like sometimes we don't know what we are doing when we haul herring instead of mackerel. The consequences for the boy with exposed flesh was indelible red spots, wet eyes, and other laughs. Funny how such dies are cast, how history repeats like a kippered burp. The next poem is in memory of my auntie Barbara Qualtrough, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago. But I'm very, very happy that she actually got to read this poem in the book the week before she died. So this is for Auntie B, and it's called Oology. My father collected bird eggs as a kid, so avidly, I think he was an oologist. His sister discovered she really liked seagull eggs, boiled, not sunny, runny, not hatched. I had a few, quite a few. He snatched them for her from cliffs above Port Erin, a hobby that he passed down to his middle son. I was awestruck at his collection's rarities. He had a few, quite a few. Which reminds me of all the wine I've drunk. So avidly, I thought I was an enologist. I had a few, quite a few. My sister suggested I quit, Celts are prone to iron retention in blood, the only solution being its letting, the way family ties can be diluted. Tarfawil ne she na ushta, not wanting to die thirsty, but with red lips. Tarfawil ne she na ushti, blood is thicker than water. In 1991, I stepped out of my skin. For the first time, there was a young man sucking a cock, like he'd arrived back home at last. Not in the sense of the 70s oblong blocks of Manx ices unwrapped and shoved into a round cone, but more so that rocket lolly. You remember, wide at the bottom, ridged with a sweet-lipped tip of white chocolate. The 90s wonder of what dialing 0898 offered. Cool, fresh and wild for it, until just after that moment of melting white, hundreds and thousands flashed by. Now too exposed to survive so raw, I crawled back into my skin, sagging and dragging itself to the bathroom. Then I threw up. This is a place that I in the northeast of the island that I discovered only last year, and immediately drafted this poem about it. It's called "According to the Signs." The footpath to Port Willen is not passable at high water. My mind floods and races with anticipation as I circle the sea-walled red Napoleon, passing under a Civil War battery like we face in our own island. The unoccupied land where I find a tiny bathing creek, looking purpose-made for the likes of us. Private and delicious, like the young men I imagine in this cove, a secret space to be ourselves with care, less abandon and timely attention to all the tides flowing inside, even rippling in our deepness. One could be left alone, with the only escape being those uphill trails to Gobnarona, paths within bracken and olden woods, a maze hiding many answers and trees with many arms. Just the last couple of poems. One of my favourite places on the Isle of Man is a place called Mule Circle, or Cronk Mule, which is Mule Hill. And it's a very rare place. It's an Iron Age, either late Bronze Age, early Iron Age stone circle that actually happens also to be a grave circle of 12 graves, 6 pairs of graves. And it's one of, there's only one other similar place in the whole of Europe, in fact. There obviously, I mean, there are lots of stone circles on the Isle of Man. There are a lot of ancient graveyards, but this is a unique place in that it combines the two. And it's the place I go to as soon as possible every time I visit the island, and stand in the middle. This is Cronk Mule. Rock crystal centre of the bald hill. Graves wherever I stare to balance, feet teeter and scratch on the edge, eyes close to a howling sun and nose. sea smelt breeze of gorse flowers, heather with undertones of sheep. In a red darkness, like whirlwinds, species after species extinguish in meteor showers of visions. Ancestors float above 12 graves, hands shaking, heads shivering at all we've yet to do. And my last poem until I think Julie's had to go, but I think Rowan and Nóra, you might have a question for me at the end just to finish things off. But as I sort of mentioned, the opposite in the whole island. This is the Vikings didn't need roads to plunder and burn, wooden vessels, graves, not tricks. A queer-shaped ball kicked about and back and over that wall, without the love of Antinous. Rich dukes envied its land and its rights, no sooner grasped than sold, to be owned by George III in 1765. A hanging chalice. Freedom is an oxymoron. Flourishing is a drag queen owning herself. Thank you so much for listening. Be posting the links online, or someone, maybe Rowan can do it for us. Is the links to buy the book. You can also buy, if you like the idea of the book, Throatbone was a sequel to my first pamphlet was a sequel to the whole island. Is very similar in exploring nature and folklore and such like. My second pamphlet, Queer Fella, is what I described as my journey from shame to unashamed, and it jointly won the Rialto pamphlet competition with a poet called Salima Hill, who you might have heard of. And my third pamphlet, Isle of Sin, which really covers the queer Manx history of the Isle of Man, the bad times of the 80s and 90s when people were persecuted by the police. But it also covers an unknown actor called Dursley McLinden, who was actually the inspiration for Ollie Alexander's character in It's a Sin. So I wanted to praise the work that he did, praise him as an actor, and praise the work that he did for other people living with HIV and AIDS. And he sadly succumbed to it in 1995 at the age of 29. So Nóra and Rowan, did you have a question for me before?
I don't know how Julie would feel, but she sent through a question as well. Maybe we could ask her question as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Should I go and start with mine?
I've got no idea what you should start with. I don't even know what the questions are.
So I guess my question, I felt that there's this thread of the extinction running through your pamphlet, both extinction as a language, extinction of species, which I found really interesting. I guess my question was, does poetry help you connect with your Manx identity and with nature, or is it just a way to express and cope with alienation or emptiness, as you say, one point, emptiness you talk about?
No, I think it's the first one. I mean, I think I remember when I went to talk to one of the schools, and someone commented to me that you know more about the Isle of Man than we do, and that's because obviously part of what you do, and I mean, I think it relates to it does relate to when parents and relatives die as well. My brother sadly died 33 years ago, and we buried him on the Isle of Man. So that sort of process started quite a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, connecting back to the island, you sort of is looking into the places that I knew and the places that I've discovered, the language, the folklore, and yeah, I mean, there's so much richness there. I think it's a way of having them as a starting point, if you like, to an exploration. And I never quite know where the poem's gonna, where a poem's going to end up afterwards. But it's sort of like an island full of poetry prompts, if you like. But it's also it's also a recognition and a homage to a place that I love. You know, and I think the virtual wiping out of the Manx language, the virtual wiping out of the Manx shearwater from the calf of man because of being eaten by Ratus norvegicus, and equally the wiping out of puffins virtually from the Isle of Man. They're just coming back after 30 years, equally again because of being eaten by that long-tailed thing. You know, they're sort of totems, if you like, for extinction, but it sort of helps me to when I eventually get a Manx collection, it will do a lot more about the connection to species extinction and human extinction as well. And I think there are lots of stuff within Manx folklore and stuff that help make those connections, I think.
Thank you. You want to go, Rowan, and then I'll end with Julie's question, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So mine is sort of more about, I guess, Manx Gaelic, which crops up obviously throughout this collection, but in other of your work that I've read as well. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about its significance to you and your work, and sort of where that language fits into your writing process.
Oh, well, I mean, I think language isn't just language, right? You know, and I think, having also worked in Africa and worked with the Kamba community in Kenya, and learning their language and learning how, despite the fact that they speak Swahili and they speak English, the importance of that, of maintaining their native language, if you like, their tribal language, of which, you know, Manx is in effect a tribal language that was started to develop around 400 AD, sort of spurred from the Irish settlers and spurred from Irish Gaelic, but it is unique in its own way. And it was declared actually extinct in 1979 by UNESCO. But there's so much in language that is unique and doesn't there isn't a word for it in English, if you see what I mean, or if there is, it's a long explanation. You know, even something like cherished has got 3 different things, or hiraeth, you know, we don't have a word. A lot of the time we don't have a word for something. But even actually, funnily enough, the same word, because language is also about it's about culture, it's about social practice, it's about politics, it's about history. So if you ask someone, Kish Tau, how are you this evening? How are you doing? Or Fastimir, good evening. And you ask someone how they are, the best thing that you can answer to that, like the one I'm the most happiest, is the word brow. And its translation is fine. But in Manx, that means I'm bloody fantastic, thanks. So even the so-called straight translations don't translate to actually meaning the same thing. So I think language gives you that access and route. And I think in terms of the writing process, obviously a lot of my poems are about a particular Manx custom related to dates, or a particular or they might be related to a folklore character. So I'm starting with the Manx word, if you like, for that custom. Like I'm wearing it's in Throatbone, but I'm wearing a cross bollen, which is a ras cross, the throat bone of a ras, which is sort of a Manx Saint Christopher, if you like. So sometimes it's the actual Manx word that provides that access, and in other times I'll write a poem and then I'll look for the Manx word for it and see if that gives some extra depth, or something like skeeting, for example, which is sort of a Manx dialect. The skeet is the news, or skeeting is looking, is just it feels to me as though it's expressing. We're always trying to find in language something that best expresses what it is, the emotion and the feeling that we're talking about, and having access to that language in order to do that is such a beautiful opportunity, really. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, beautifully. Thank you.
In the meantime, I've had approval from Julie to ask her questions, so that's great. So Julie wanted to know about the significance of the title Whole Island to the collection, and how far the process of writing has changed your feelings about the island.
Well, you have two questions in one. I'll forget one of the questions by the time I try to answer the other one. Well, the whole island poem is really pretty much, apart from a couple of rewrites of other poems like Cross Kern, was sort of the first poem, really. I wrote that way back in 2021. It was published in November 21 in Long Poem magazine. And I remember my friend Annie Kissack, the fifth Manx Bard, she said, I sent the poem to her, and she said, Simon, this it really sums up your ambivalence about the Isle of Man. And I was quite shocked at this, really. But it made me consider that yes, even though I think it would be fairer to say the ambivalence isn't a love and hate ambivalence. It's probably more of a joy and sorrow ambivalence, if that makes sense. The sort of the scale, and because there's so much to be joyful and celebratory about the Isle of Man, but there is also things about particularly its history, and perhaps some of the attitudes that still exist there that aren't particularly joyful and are much more sorrowful. And I guess in my writing I'm trying to explore all of that, and it very quickly sort of felt that the whole island as a poem sort of encapsulated maybe not the full breadth of what I want to cover, but a large breadth of what I wanted to explore. And I certainly want to explore, and when I eventually get a full collection of Manx, I've been writing a lot about the internment camps that and also the shipment of Manx prisoners to the colonies as well, and the slave trade captains that were Manx, and its colonial history as the arguably the first English colony, and my sort of position that it should pretty well get out, and leave it alone. which I know has got a certain hypocriticalness to it, but so it's certainly, to answer that question, my feelings about my nationalistic feelings are even stronger than they ever used to be, and I guess my love for the island is stronger, and also my determination to even say the things that some people don't want to hear about the island equally are there as well. I think it's important to as I said, in the whole island, really, you know, until we're prepared to remember history, then we'll almost certainly repeat it.
It's so true. I think someone's got a question for you in the chat.
Oh, have they?
Or Anna, yeah.
Well, Anna, it was officially extinct. It's not officially extinct now. I mean, it was actually, I mean, UNESCO, naughty boys and girls, they made a mistake. It wasn't quite 2,000 people in the last census, and this is an island of only 85,000 people, have ticked that they speak Manx Gaelic. There is a primary school that teaches children in Manx in the Isle of Man. I mean, there's 15 or 16 primary schools, but there's one particular primary school that is a Manx Gaelic school, and there's a massive resurgence, and Culture Vannin supported me in both Throatbone and in this book, because they're a sort of a sister of the Arts Council in the Isle of Man, particularly focused on culture and heritage and language. So, you know, there's encouragement there for me to include the language, and so it's made a massive revival, and there's a lot of there's a lot of resources to be able to look into not just the language, but equally some of the amazing folklore, or some of the traditions that perhaps used to exist here as well, but have completely disappeared. Folklore practices would have been connected to, probably in many cases, to the time when originally Manx people were Druids, before the Irish came, and then before the Vikings came, and then before the English and Scottish started kicking us around like a queer-shaped football. So yeah, I mean, it's so using all the resources in the Isle of Man is the answer to your question, and getting the support of friends on the island who've got specialisms in either language or folklore. I hope that answered your question, Anna. Is there anything else, or should we wrap up? So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Nóra and Rowan, and Julie for reading, making this the first Crocodile Collective outing. Yeah, you've got the links there. If you'd like a signed copy of the book, then please do place an order and tell your friends about it. Really very much appreciated for everyone to come along. Yeah, that's it. I don't know, we can sort of unmute everybody if anyone wants to ask any questions or stick around for a few minutes, but otherwise, thank you very, very much for coming. They were good questions, you guys. I'm glad I didn't know them in advance, though. And I think my brain is, yeah, I get two questions and I like, oh God, two lose track of which question you're answering.
Yeah, I don't know. People do interviews and take multiple questions at once. How the hell did they then answer them all?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know what? I think sometimes, Nóra, is I'm sure you know with some of your corporate events, it's a trick. It's like the politician's trick, isn't it? Right. So, let's take 3 questions, and then the person answering them can choose which question they're
Yeah,
going to
the one they don't like, they can
conveniently
ignore.
or
Yeah.
conveniently just brush over. But
yeah, that's what my boss told me when I did the Zoom event and I had to do a presentation. He said, just take a bunch of questions at once, and then the one you don't like, you can just pretend that you've forgotten.
yeah.
Simon, my uncle just sent a private message to me saying he doesn't know how to send a message to everyone, but please pass on his thanks. That was a special experience. Just
Oh, wonderful. Who's that then? Who was that in the list?
Andrew King.
Sorry?
Andrew King.
Ah, right, okay.
At the end, that's my aunt and uncle.
So, welcome to the launch of The Whole Island. I'm going to kick off before Rowan and Nóra and Julie read. I'm going to kick off with the titular poem, En Slain Elian, The Whole Island, was published by Long Poem magazine, which gives you a sort of a bit of a warning that it's about 5 minutes long. It's actually after the poet Virgilio Pinera, a gay Cuban poet who lived from 1912 to 1979. And it's inspired by his famous book-length poem, La Isla en Peso, which literally means the weight of the island. But that's usually translated to the whole island, even though, you know, a lot of what he writes about is pretty much the weight of the island in the way that it weighs heavily or weighs lightly on him, particularly as a queer man who was silenced. Anyway, En Slain Elian, the charm of water hangs around my neck. If I thought the waters encircling me weren't maternal fluid, I'd never sleep. If I thought this island was a cancer that ate my father's bones, I'd never return. I've stood where my father was born and where he's buried. I still see his sunburnt wrinkles skeeting the horizon. I have fished off breakwater and boat for mackerel, a lesser substitute for herring, but stronger in the tug when hooked. He pickled pots of them for hours. His breaded cud preceded the self-judged announcement of its relative success. I watched him unscrew a brass doorknob at the ruining farmhouse in Grenaby, a sense of entitlement common to this island. What is 50 years of belonging to someone else when it was ours for 200 more? Whose island is this anyway? A colonial haven came and went, came and lent and sold with scattered remnants. Our island is almost too old to define itself. He nun slain Elian Rowan. The whole of the island lay before us. He noon slain Elian Rowan, the daily mist, the nightly fog, the wet is always 15 minutes from the sun and 12 minutes from the wind. All the land's weather is underfoot, but on the sea it floats and swirls and sinks. Complacency is our greatest risk. My brother was stung by a scorpion in a Ghanaian sandpit before he sat on a beach. A woman who no longer shares my name came back and went, whilst the other two of us never lived back, although one lies here dead. All of this is to say that some drown in the sea and some drown on the land, whilst others just love to swim. I remember the old woman who was surrounded by water for 100 years and was questioned about her belief in fairies. She scowled at the TV presenter. Of course not, she snapped. But in our next breath, she assured us they're there just the same. I linger over Manx food, queen scallops, licked rock and kippers. From the rowing boat, I pick mussels one by one from the iron pier in search of music like sea, sugar and smoke. We boil them in seawater and white wine. I imagine this is what being a grown-up is like, and I still wish that it's true. Here, the island's people sacrifice their livers and hunt for liverworts in glens. There was once a clear Manx whisky that lost its name in court for not being brown, and now it's called Manx Blue. To say its people are alcoholics clinging to a rock is droc ella knack. I find freedom in my cocoon, if only for a while. I go south digging potatoes, flint arrows and horse bones, hoping for something else. When I reach Cregnish, Uncle Stan rips up that letter from British royalty to light a fire, and then shares the story about the gold-laden Spanish galleon and the drinking dragon off Ukholu. The lookout crew were so scared by its fiery breath, it was too late for the captain and too late for the rocks. There is a freedom in imagining the truth and remembering it too. Eternal histories of Vikings and Druids who were and Celts who weren't, or the other way around, or any way at all. Quocunque Jaceris stabit. There is a reason why the Romans never made it across to Manannan's Isle. There is also a reason we captained the ships, but no reason for the necessary evil of Captain Crow. Eternal histories we cannot judge or change until we remember. In the time it took illegal boys to be legal men, 12 died for being bent. The chug of the drowned gay boy's car still hums on the seafront. The hosepipe washed up like driftwood on the beach. His shoes on the Tower of Refuge rocks. These eternal histories of shame, if only those boys walked freely, like after those internment camp fences were taken down. South of Erie Cushlin, the hen harrier soars above the hollow where the chapel lies, evading persecution like the monks of old, feeding on meadow pipits and voles. On the edge of extinction, on the edge of the whole island, the edge of our language hovers. Thank you so much. And yeah, this is
so good.
This is the brass doorknob that my dad turned into a blotter. And now we'll move on to the other poets.